This is the Drake Passagia, part of the Southern Ocean located between South America and Antarctica. Almost no ship passes through here, only a few throughout the year, because this is the most hated and feared sea route of the world. Over 20,000 sailors have died trying to navigate these waters, and according to estimates, more than 800 ships have been wrecked in the region. All of this occurs because of the feared fervent marquess that exists in this area, caused by geographic and meteorological factors that completely impact the southern part of South America and make ships reluctant to sail beneath it. But why is this passage so dangerous, having sunk so many ships, and moreover, how does it harm South America? That's what we're going to explore throughout this video. In 1578, Sir Francis Drake, an English captain from the Kingdom of England, was sailing in the southern region of America, and one of his ships ended up discovering a connection between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Even though Francis Drake never actually sailed through the Drake Passage, the region still bears his name. Over the following centuries, the passage became a commercial route since there were not many alternatives between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. However, it soon became a much feared route due to its turbulent conditions and the numerous shipwrecks that occur in the area. One of the factors that makes it so dangerous is its location very close to the South Pole, where the cold currents are most intense. Moreover, because Antarctica has a rounded shape, it is surrounded by several oceans: the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Southern, and the Indian. This configuration causes the currents to form a sort of whirlpool around Antarctica, with waters moving in circles around the icy continent. But when these currents reach the narrow passage between South America, they collide completely because they must squeeze through a tight corridor. This effect is further intensified by the shape of South America's southern tip and the peninsula, creating a funnel for the maritime currents. The result is that the current here is the most intense in the world, about 600 times stronger than that of the Amazon River. We can compare this region to a highway. Imagine a highway with 10 lanes where there's plenty of room for cars to pass. Now, imagine that highway narrowing to only 2 lanes. At some point, traffic becomes much denser simply because the available space for the cars has decreased. Something similar happens in the Drake Passage, and it gets even more interesting because there are no barriers to stop this flow of water. In other words, there is almost no land to obstruct the water's passage, only the Erra-Ramirez Islands sit in the middle, which hardly affect the configuration of the maritime currents. These currents are actually part of the Scott Sea, one of the deepest seas in the world, which separates South America from Antarctica. The outcome of all this is that the region experiences some of the highest waves in the world, reaching up to 10 meters in height. Even in 2022, a cruise ship was passing through the area when even the smallest wave struck the vessel, fatally striking one crew member and injuring others, an incident that recurs in the region. In the Drake Passage, there is also an encounter between the South American currents and the cold currents. Essentially, at the equator, the sun is more intense, warming these waters. However, as the currents move southward and descend through the southern cone to the tip of South America, warm and cold currents meet, further intensifying the maritime movements and making the seas even more turbulent. This phenomenon is not exclusive to this area. In the south of Africa, for example, it was once known as the Cape of Storms because many ships sank there as well. In that region, the South Pole currents also meet the warm currents of the Indian Ocean, which contribute to the intensity of the waves. Wind is another major factor influencing wave height in the Drake Passage. Strong winds can increase the height of the waves and make navigation extremely dangerous. The stronger the wind, the higher the waves. The southwest winds are known for generating large waves in the region. These winds blow from the southwest to the northeast, creating waves that hit the coast or islands at a perpendicular angle. These waves tend to increase in height as they approach the coast, making navigation even more dangerous, especially since the distance between the tip of South America and the peninsula is much shorter. Another problem with passing through here is that, being a polar region, many seas freeze throughout the year due to the low temperatures at the poles, which can only lead to issues with the ice formations in the Drake Passage. Sea ice forms during the winter and can increase the size of the waves. This ice moves with the ocean currents and can create obstacles for navigation. It can also block sunlight during the winter, which may lead to an increase in the water temperature, and an increase in water temperature, in turn, can result in higher waves, making navigation even more dangerous. So much so that in October 2022, satellite imagery revealed the largest remaining piece of what was once the largest iceberg floating in the world's oceans. In the photo, the black area represents the sea, and that immense white block has been nicknamed a 76, the largest iceberg found in the Drake region. This came after its predecessor, which was only a part of the largest iceberg in the world that was also present here. The A76 split into 3 distinct parts in 2021, further increasing the region's danger. There are 2 events that highlight these risks. One, although it didn't happen here, is the most famous case in the world. The Titanic, which was traveling from Ireland to the United States across the Atlantic, was sunk by a massive iceberg even, though it wasn't even in the coldest regions of the planet. A similar event occurred in the Drake Passage. In 2007, another cruise ship carrying more than 150 passengers collided with an iceberg and sank hours later. Fortunately, everyone was rescued, unlike on the Titanic. However, the fact that ships rarely pass through here doesn't necessarily hurt South America, it simply means one less commercial route. Today, cargo ships are primarily used for exporting and importing, and the risks must be carefully calculated for each route. Because the Drake Passage has such a notorious reputation, trips that could potentially be made here are not undertaken. The Baban Strait is an example. It's a very calm area at sea, but there is a risk of pirates robbing cargo ships, and all these risks must be factored into choosing a maritime route. But there is also an alternative, the Strait of Magellan, a short, narrow strait that is actually used more frequently than the Drake Passage. The real issue, however, is the distance between the tip of South America and the rest of the world's shipping routes. It is one of the most remote routes on the planet, which increases travel costs and discourages companies from operating maritime routes. For instance, the distance from the tip of South America to the United States is about 9,300 kilometers. To Portugal in Europe is around 12,000 kilometers. And if you compare it to Asia, it's even greater, about 16,000 kilometers. Thus, given that South America is not one of the world's largest importers and exporters, and because the Drake Passage is so dangerous and feared, it's very clear why ships avoid sailing around the southern tip of South America.